Sup, y'all? It's me. It's your boy Asmongold, and today I wanted to talk to you guys about a Q&A session that Ian Azakostas did a couple of days ago on Twitch. Now, whenever I do one of these summaries, I obviously am not going to be talking about every single little point, but if you want to watch the VOD and see the entire Q&A, a link to that will be in the video description below. So basically what they talked about was in 7.3, how they're going to be changing the content pacing, especially in comparison to 7.2, how the Netherlight Crucible is going to unlock, and how people are going to get world quests and account stuff, or sorry, like account bound stuff and all of that. They also talked a lot about how they're going to be making Legion in general more alt friendly in 7.3, which is fucking great. On top of that, they talked about some retrospectives into not only existing systems like Mythic Plus, but also systems that used to be in the game like Reforging. So I'm really glad to get that perspective, and I really enjoy it whenever they do these Q&A sessions, I'll be honest, because whenever Ian talks about stuff, it feels to me like he gives a very candid and honest and well-reasoned argument, and he makes it make sense, right? So even whenever I disagree with something, like I don't really like, I disagree with them like taking out Reforging as an example, but at least whenever he explains it, it kind of makes sense why they did it, even though I disagree with the reasoning. So I'm glad that they're doing that, and I really appreciate them doing these Q&As, and I hope they continue to do them like they have been for pretty much all of Legion. So the first thing that they talked about was in 7.3, the content pacing, right? So in 7.2, with the Broken Shore quest line, it's like you'd log on every Tuesday and you'd be like, oh my god, I can't wait to see what kind of amazing epic quest line is going to be happening this week. And you talk to Illidan and he says, kill 100 more fucking demons. So obviously that's very, very anticlimactic. It's not fun, it's boring, and it's like, why do we have to wait to kill 100 demons every single week? It's just stupid. So with 7.3, they're going to be shortening that to pretty much like a 3-week scenario. So the first week, you're going to be getting like your baseline world quests. You're going to be getting other like just general world content that's available in the in Argus. I almost forgot. In Argus, week 2 comes around, you're going to be getting world quests, another level of world quests, and then also invasion points, which are kind of, I think they're kind of like scenarios, or maybe a little bit more like greater rifts, or maybe just normal rifts in Diablo. And then on week 3, you're going to be getting the Netherlight Crucible, which is like a relic modification thing, and also I think there's a couple of other things that go along with it as well. And then on top of that, you're going to be getting access to the new dungeon, the Seat of the Triumvirate. Now, the Netherlight Crucible and also access to that dungeon, I don't want to try and say the word again, are both going to be account bound. So that is an amazing, great change, and I love that, especially they did that as well with 7.1 in Karazhan, which is great. And also, on top of other account-bound changes that they're going to make, before I get into the Argus stuff anymore, and the reasoning for that is that, number one, as soon as you hit 110, you get all 3 relic slots. You don't have to do the Class Order Hall quest line, which I think is great. I love doing the Class Order Hall quest lines. I thought I would hate it, but personally, I've enjoyed going through them on my alts. On top of that, right now, whenever you get your 54 traits in your weapon, whenever you hit 110, you'd have to go to the Broken Shore and do the Broken Shore questline in order to activate and access the rest of them. They're getting rid of that as well, and you won't have to do the Broken Shore questline, and I'm really, really glad about that. The third thing that they're doing is Artifact Knowledge. Now, Artifact Knowledge is being scaled up by a huge degree in 7.3. So it's going from level 40, which is our cap right now, at 4 million %, all the way up to 55, which, so I'll just go ahead and throw out some numbers at you guys so you can understand. So 41 is 16 million %, and 55 is correct me if I'm wrong, is 600, maybe only 500, but it doesn't matter, 600 or 530 million % modifier. So right now, we're at 4 million, and we're going up to over 500 million. That's a big change. I don't even know. Like, I mean, you're gonna go pick up a rock in Val Shara once you hit max level, and you're done. That's it. You got concordance. You just picked up a rock. There you go. Good job. So also on top of that, Artifact Knowledge, you're not gonna have to place orders, like work orders for it anymore. It's just a global thing. It's like the time of day. It's like you log on and it's like I don't know, like it's Christmas. It's like Merry Christmas, there's a new Artifact Knowledge level. You don't actually have to go and place orders. It just completely is independent. You don't have to do anything, and I think that's great for alts. So now you don't have to worry about dealing with work orders on all of your alts, which actually isn't an issue anymore because now you have those books you can send over to your alts, but before that, it was really, really annoying. So I'm really glad that they're making these alt changes, and it's going to make playing alts a little bit more bearable. I think probably the worst thing, though, to be honest, the worst thing with Legion and playing alts is legendaries, right? So on your main, if you play a lot, you probably have it close to, if not all of the legendaries for your main spec. So you don't really have to worry about not having the right legendary anymore. But if you're trying to play an alt and be serious with it at all, not getting the right legendaries on that alt can be extremely demoralizing, and it can make you feel like you're never really going to get as far as you can on that character, and it would just take a huge amount of time. Because if you remember, I mean, Legion's been out for, almost an entire year, and just now people are finishing their entire legendary collection. So there's no way somebody can do that on like multiple characters unless they're playing 24/7, and even then maybe they can only do it on 2 or 3. So I'd really like to see them do something to make legendaries a little bit more obtainable on alts, but the changes that they're making right now for 7.3 is amazing if you want to play other characters. I'm very happy about that. Now, going back to the Argus questline, I think that a 3-week period and unlocking things in a 3-week period is completely fine. Like, the Broken Shore questline was way too long, but that doesn't mean that everything should come out on day 1, and it doesn't mean that everything should take, like, whatever, 12 weeks or whatever. I think there's a happy medium, and the 3-week period that they're doing in 7.3 is pretty close to that. Obviously, I think it's good for them to, like, unlock some stuff on 1 week, and then people just do that stuff, rather than people just kind of waiting for and just focusing entirely on what they want to do, and forgetting about everything else. So I'm very glad about that, and I think it's a very good thing. Also, one more thing that I forgot to say is that they are making it easier to gear up your champions in 7.3 as well, which is very good. I think it's entirely, like, really, really boring. I don't mind, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I don't mind the whole thing with, like, having your champions and then leveling them up and, like, kind of the Facebook gameplay that it gives you. I think it's a cool little, like, a mini game that you can do if you want. Same with pet battles, but I don't like how it's tied to actual character progression by doing, like, the quests for, like going into like the Tumor Sargeras and you get a Mythic Plus box or something like that. I don't really like that. But anyway, also with the Netherlight Crucible is kind of, it allows you to give, I think, a relic a second level of a trait. Now, you can't give the same relic 2 traits. So I can do, as an example, like for Fury Warriors, the Battlecry relic that makes you do more damage while you have Battlecry up is the best relic, right? And so you can't get a relic, it has Battlecry, and then use the Netherlight Crucible to apply another rank of Battlecry onto that same relic. You can't do that, but basically they're trying to allow people to get a little bit more control over the RNG that they had with relics, and I think that's kind of good. Obviously, I'd love to see more controls for RNG and more ways that you can kind of I guess, like, offset bad luck, right? And if you play a lot, maybe you'd be able to, I don't know. I've always wanted to be able to upgrade gear myself instead of having to just wait and hope that it would Titan Forge. And actually, that brings me to the next point, which is reforging. Now, reforging, they took reforging out of the game in, I believe, it was Warlords of Draenor. And I thought that was generally a bad decision, and I still think it's a bad decision. And the logic that they use to, justify the decision is, it doesn't really make sense, right? Because originally they had reforging to allow people to deal with hidden expertise, and they took hidden expertise out of the game, and I believe because they did that, then they thought, well, because we don't have hidden expertise in the game, we don't need to have reforging anymore either. Personally, I think reforging allowed people to get at least kind of shitty gear, and make that shitty gear not quite as shitty. It's really demoralizing whenever you get a piece of gear that's like 20 item levels higher than what you have, and it has the exact worst stats for you. And reforging allowed that to be a little bit less of just a disappointment and a little bit more of a consolation prize. So I'd really like to see that happen. Also, they said that it was not interesting. It was not interesting to have to just reforge your gear. I'd rather have things not be interesting than have them be disappointing. Like, it's disappointing whenever you get a piece of gear, it's got the wrong stats and you can't use it. It just sucks. Reforging allows you to, I guess, make things that are not really that bad. They're really bad, not really that bad. And I would love to see that come back in the game. I don't really think they should add hidden expertise back into the game. I thought it was just stupid, and it was a waste of, it's just stupid. don't really think they should have it back in the game. It provided no gameplay or nothing. You just had to meet the cap and that was it. But aside from that, I would really like to see Reforging come back into the game to allow players a little bit more control over their character. Now, on top of that, of course, the artifact knowledge stuff and artifact power, all of that is going to be active in PvP, and specifically the Netherite Crucible. Now, your artifact traits do not actually work in rated PvP, and I don't even think the traits work now. So no traits, I believe, work in PvP at all anyway. So the Netherite Crucible traits will not work either, but the item level gains that you get from them will, of course, work as well. So that's kind of... I actually am pretty much indifferent to that. It's probably the best way to handle it. Now, for artifact appearances, they're not going to be making any more artifact appearances for the weapons. Now, I don't really know if they had any in 7.3 and they're including ones that they might add in 7.3, but I'm assuming that the ones that we have right now are pretty much all of the iterations of the weapons that we're going to see. So for a lot of people, now that Legion is in more of a mature stage, it's almost been out for a year, as I said before, they're looking at trying to get these artifact appearances for their alts, and they're worried because what Blizzard had said before is that you're going to be able to keep those artifact appearances for your character going forward past Legion, so like into the next expansion, if you would obtain them in Legion. But they are trying to revise that stance, and they might change it to where you are able to get some of those appearances later on in the game after Legion, but we'll have to wait and see. And of course, besides the Mythic plus 15 and the challenge, the ones that are inherently challenging at level cap, right? So, like, I mean, if you're doing a plus 15 Maw of Souls at level, like, whatever, like 120, it's going to be a joke, right? And so, of course, you're not going to get a color for that because there is a certain level of prestige associated with that. But I'm assuming a lot of the other ones, like the archaeology, balance of power things, you probably will be able to go back and achieve later on after Legion, which I think is a positive thing. They're also not making prestige account-wide. Now, prestige, of course, is the PvP thing. I think the logic behind that, what they said, basically what Ian said, is that because prestige is something that you can work towards, if they make it account-wide, then you won't have anything to work towards on all of your characters. Now, I would counter that by saying I don't really want a PvP on any of my characters because I know in order to actually be fully functional, I would have to play 8 or 10 hours of PvP being non-functional. And not even in a gear way, it just for an arbitrary reason that I just don't have these talents unlocked. And I feel like if you've reached Prestige like 5 or reached Prestige like 10 or something like that, you should be able to unlock a portion at least of those talents for your alt characters. Because at a certain point, it really just becomes entirely boring playing the game and knowing that you're just playing at a disadvantage because you don't have these talents unlocked for an arbitrary reason. So I would really like to see that change, but I can see why they're doing it the way that they are. Now, Mythic Plus, they're actually very happy with the changes that they made to Mythic Plus, and so like whenever they announced them, I was not very happy because they were effectively they were cutting the loot in half. Now, after they made the change later on that they would allow you to get more and more pieces the higher key that you do, I thought that was a very good change, and I thought that was a very good response to people's concerns. And apparently it's worked because Ian had said that all of the participation for Mythic Plus has gone up across the board. More people are doing Mythic Plus, and it's at least kind of in line with how many people were doing Mythic Plus whenever the item level was increased back in Nighthold. So I'm very glad that's happening. I've been doing a lot of Mythic Plus. A lot of people that watch my stream really enjoy watching Mythic Plus. So I would say it's a very compelling thing. And also paired with the invitational that they're doing for like Mythic Plus tournaments. I think that Mythic Plus is in a very, very good spot right now. Maybe they could balance out some dungeons a little bit better, but for the most part, I think in terms of the rewards that it gives and everything, Mythic Plus is in a very, very good spot. And looking back in retrospective, after all the changes that they've made, I do believe that Mythic Plus is in a better spot now than it was whenever you were just rushing to get 3 chests. And I don't really know if that's me revising my position or not, but I think that after they made the change that you can push for higher and higher keys and get more and more loot, that's whenever I think it turned into a good thing. So on top of that, they talked a little bit about like nerfing the Mythic Plus dungeons, and I really didn't like this because they were talking about Cathedral of Eternal Night, and is it just too hard, or do players not know how to do the dungeon, so they're just not acclimated to it yet? And I feel like that's just such a ridiculous thing to say, because if you just look at the straight numbers, like some bosses in Cathedral had 50 million, 100 million more health than equivalent bosses in other dungeons, where there's no other way that it's being compensated for, like ads or more trash mobs or anything. These bosses just straight up did more damage and had more health. So to say that players weren't being acclimated to that is just being completely ignorant to the numbers that are actually being presented. So I really didn't like the way that they addressed that, and I really hope that going forward, whenever there are new dungeons that were added into the game, there will either be better rewards for completing those dungeons if they're harder, or those dungeons will be closer in terms of difficulty to the existing ones. Now, you can say that that's like, you don't want to have, there shouldn't be any variety. There should be a level of variety, but if the variety is big enough, then people aren't going to want to do the dungeons that are very hard, and that's going to make a very negative player experience, right? I used this example before. It's like if you got a cathedral before the nerfs, you got a key. That's a dead key. You're not doing that key. Nobody's going to want to do that with you. So it's just good overall for everybody, especially in terms of influencing player behavior, if the dungeons are on some flat level of difficulty, assuming that they're on the same keystone level. So I think that's a very, very positive thing, and I would love to see that happen. I don't really know like what else they're going to do with Mythic Plus, but I would like to see them add it for like new dungeons, or sorry, old dungeons, and maybe make some sort of a Mythic Plus raid. I don't know how that would go though. It could be something like TOC, like Trial of the Crusader, where you just fight boss after boss and it becomes more and more difficult, kind of like a wave thing, like Proving Grounds in a way. But I'm not really sure what would be the best solution. I do think that would be pretty interesting though. Now, they also talked about the world first race. Now, there's been a lot of criticism about that, and also about split runs and just like everything involving TOS. A lot of people are not satisfied with how TOS went, especially in terms of Mythic. There are a lot of mechanics in TOS that basically you just have to soak some sort of an ability, right? You have to stand in front of something, you have to absorb something, like the beams on Kil'jaeden, and Ian said that was a result of a lack of communication between the developers, which is reasonable. I mean, people fuck up, that's the way it goes. Hopefully it doesn't happen again, and I don't think that it will, but at least it makes sense, and it indicates that they're not happy with how things are, so that's definitely a good thing. On top of that, they are trying to make some classes give them a little bit more raid utility and balance them out a little bit more, which I think is a positive thing. They said as a general rule they'd want the Mythic Plus, the Mythic first race, World First Race, to last about like a week to 2 weeks, and I think that's what it said, right? Yeah, week and a half to 2 weeks. Yeah, so like 1 to 2 weeks. I think that's pretty reasonable, because if it's anything longer than that, you're going to have people that just burn out, and it's going to be impossible for people to even compete. And it is interesting to watch those high-end guilds compete for those first kills. So I think that's positive. In general, like, I would say that TOS was a pretty good raid. I like it a lot more than Nighthold in terms of the aesthetics, but some of the bosses are extremely frustrating, and it does seem like some mechanics in those boss fights are completely needless. I think like an example of that is like if you stand in the ink pools whenever you're fighting Mistress Shazrin or whatever, your chance to hit is reduced substantially, and I don't really see what that adds to the fight, and I just feel like that's just a frustrating, annoying mechanic, especially for melee, and it makes the fight unfun and frustrating and just dumb. But for the most part, I do like TOS, and I know a lot of other people do not, but that's my personal opinion. Now, Kil'jaeden was obviously overtuned, and apparently they went the Diablo 3 way of buffing Kil'jaeden, and not really buffing, but designing Kil'jaeden, is that the internal testers tested Kil'jaeden, and then they just increased the percentages on all of the different mechanics and all of his health, which is pretty much what Ian said. I think that's kind of a ridiculous way of doing things, especially to the extent that we had the I'm on Allcrafts, which with like Haunted and Rich, I think we do this on like Mondays, and we had Sko on there, and he's like the GM of Method, and he was talking, and he said that like there's just no way you're gonna be able to kill Kil'jaeden whenever it was first released. So I don't really see how you can say that the internal testing team was doing really well and they were able to do Mythic Kil'jaeden whenever the top guild in the world is saying that it's impossible. I don't know. It just seems like it's kind of like either one or the other can be true, but not both. Now, they are also changing the way that nether shards are going to be working, or not really nether shards, they're changing the entire paradigm of that. Nether shards are no longer going to be the meta anymore, and there's a new item called, I believe it's called Argonite, that you're going to be able to use to turn in for the 9.10 versions of Relinquish tokens whenever 7.3 comes out. And nether shards are basically a dead currency. You're not going to need them for pretty much anything. So, unless you want to get more 880 here. So don't worry about farming out nether shards or saving them. All of the new stuff is going to be happening on Argus. So they did talk a little bit about Raid Finder. Now, as you guys know, I love Raid Finder. And they were basically saying that they wanted to make it a little bit more difficult. And they wanted to make it closer in terms of difficulty to Mists of Pandaria than Warlords of Draenor. In WoD, Raid Finder, I did it like maybe once or twice on an alt. It was a complete joke. So I think they could make it a little bit more difficult to give people a sense of satisfaction. I think whenever you do something and there's no element of difficulty, nothing is hard at all, there's just really like it's an empty, hollow experience, and you don't actually feel good whenever you finish doing it. So I think making Raid Finder a little bit harder and making it, I think, maybe a little bit more rewarding if they do make it harder, would give people a better experience. I don't really know, but that's my opinion. Now, they did talk a little bit. One concern that some people have is with split raids, which is whenever like a guild on the first week of a new raid, they'll bring in like, I don't know, like they'll have alts, right? So like everybody in the guild will have an alt. And some people do like 6 or 7 split raids, but just for simplicity's sake, let's say you just do 2 raids, and one of them, or each one of them, is with like half mains, half alts. So it allows you to funnel more gear into those mains to make them better prepared for Mythic progression. Now, my opinion on what they should do with that and how they should fix split raids is nothing. You just do nothing. Is it really that big of a fucking deal? Is it really that big of a deal that they're going to be doing this all the time? Any sort of solution that they're going to make for split rating is going to somehow fuck somebody else up. And it's going to be like, oh, well, you can only do 1 difficulty per week, or you can only do inter-TOS or the new raid on 3 or 4 different characters a week. None of that is ever going to work. People are going to find ways around it, and the only thing that you're going to do is end up punishing the people that are just trying to play the game legitimately. If somebody wants to poop suck it for the first 2 weeks, raid all the fucking time, do 5 different TOS runs on Heroic to funnel gear to 3 different characters in a raid, knock yourself out. It's not a big deal. Like, why would that even make a big difference at all? I think the entire fixation and problem with that is just ridiculous. Who cares? I don't think that Blizzard should plan for it. I don't think that the guild should really do it. I mean, they will, but I wouldn't do it if I was them. I just think it's a complete waste of time to even consider it or even think about it. People are always going to do things that are going to give them advantages. It's not like this is the only thing that people can do to get advantages. So those are the main things that they talked about. Those are the things that I think are worth discussing. And I think it's just I think it was a good Q&A. I really do. Obviously, they didn't talk about anything that like anything like going forward as much as I would really want them to. Like, how are they going to change things for the next expansion? And really what I'm trying to say is I would love for them to say, yo, Legion had too much fucking RNG. We're going to tone that shit down next time. And they didn't say that. I wish they did, though. But for the most part, I'm really glad that they're doing these Q&A sessions. Most things I agreed with, some things I didn't, but as I said, I'm really glad that it happened in the first place. So that's pretty much all I've got. I'd be curious to hear what you guys have, what your opinions are on it. Those are mine. So thanks a lot for watching, and like, comment, and subscribe.